Thank you. It's an honor to be here with everybody today. All right. Well, that's nice and loud. I'm going to turn that down just a little so I'm not blowing everybody away here.
Yeah.
So, I came here to share my testimony, which actually this is going to be a two-part testimony. I'm going to share my first salvation experience, and I'll tell a little history too. Darby's my best friend, so we've been rolling together for quite some time, and we've been through a lot of roller coaster of life together. I met Darby in a police station. Actually, we were both witnesses of someone was raped at a party we were at, and I went in support of the victim, and he had been friends with the girlfriend of the gentleman who was being accused of doing the crime. And we met there, and this was a few years, this has been in 2003 or 2004. And we just kind of really hit it off. And oddly enough, this is the first time I'm telling the story. He usually tells it, so I'm kind of like doing my little version. And yeah, we just really hit it off, and we kind of, it had been years then that passed, and I was managing a cafe in Lancaster called the Lancaster Coffee Company, or the Coffee Company. And I had been researching a lot, trying to seek God and find God in the Upanishads, the Vedas, Black Elk Speaks, the Tao's, you name it. I was doing all the research I could, and I had more of an ecumenical concept of like all paths led to God. And I was really into a guy named Joseph Campbell at the time. I don't know if any of you have heard of him, but I was like reading all his books and reading all this stuff. And I was like, because I this thought in my head that I was raised in a Judeo-Christian society, so maybe that was part of the reason I had become a Christian or a follower of Christ as a child. And at that time, that kind of was the reasoning, because I was born into it. But after studying and praying, one night, actually 2 nights after my band had got a contract offer from Warner Brothers, I just got this inspiration to write the necessity of Christ as a for Judaism, the necessity of Christ to exist, to keep on like the prophecy and keep everybody together after the fall of Jerusalem, when Jerusalem was burned by Nero in around 70 AD. So as I was writing this paper, I had an out-of-body experience, and I saw myself preaching the gospel. And the next morning, I went into my drum teacher, and his name was Clyde Lucas, and he was like, Woody. He's like, Kathy and I have been praying for you every day. And he had drummed with jazz greats, and he was just a fantastic guy. He's passed on, but he gave me one really strong point of advice. He said, whatever I do, don't rationalize it away, and like stay true into it. And I think was one of the most important things I could have heard at that time. Because the way of following the Lord is a way of faith. It's by faith in God and the things of God, and trusting his word over our own minds, over our own experiences, over what everything in life is telling us. It's about making that leap and finding that stairwell underneath your feet and walking right up it like the gentleman did in the video. So shortly after that, people started telling me this guy Darby was asking about me at my work. And they're like, yeah, this guy Darby keeps asking about you. He's coming here all the time. My boss told me. And he was like, I've been praying for you. I heard you got saved. I was like, yes. And so that started a season of us closing the coffee shop, which actually the owners were believers. So they were pretty okay with it for the most part. They did pull me aside. As I said recently to someone, I forget who, they pulled me aside and said, hey, man, we love that you have a zeal for the Lord, but you can't be telling every customer that walks in the door about Jesus and the salvation story. But Darby had told me some things at that time where you could call the Psalms out and call God out, for what he promises in a positive way, not challenging or doubting him. And we would just run in circles around that place. And it ended up, a lot of people got saved at that era, like through that period of time. A lot of people I worked with. And we created had a Bible study group shortly after that. And we were studying the Greek and Hebrew and the basis of salvation, soteriology. So like have justification, imputation, righteousness, regeneration, adoption, propitiation, expiation, some things a lot of people aren't always too familiar with. A lot of them are in the book of Romans. It's pretty much got all of it. But so we studied that in the Hebrew and Greek terms that went along with that. At that time, I was also going to Bible college. And we were my group of friends, we were street preachers. So everybody in the church was trained up to preach. And it was like kind of didn't matter if you're young or old, male, female, everybody would take one of those like topics, whether it was justification, propitiation, so on and so forth, and they'd take it and be like, okay, you got to preach it now. And so we go into all the inner city parks, excuse me, of Lancaster in Lancaster County, and we would go to Pittsburgh as well because our pastor lived in Pittsburgh, and it was just beautiful. We kept it simple. We preached the gospel. We fed the poor, loved on them, and we ended up setting up a church right down beside the rescue mission in Lancaster City. So we would take any of the people from the church and we disciple them, and any of the people from the mission, preach to them if they were interested, and we discipled them in our little church, which was like it was kind of a little storefront building, and then it was just a couple rooms. It was just a circle of chairs, a small group, and I didn't know what I was going to go into, so I'm kind of, pardon me if I'm getting a little expanding a little bit or expounding a little bit. Through that time period, I started a business with some guys out of the study called Living Stones Masonry, and it had been going really well. I had put the music behind me. I had left everything that I had in life to follow Jesus. It wasn't a hard decision. When you're seeking God and God reveals himself, what else do you do? Who else do you follow? You have the words of everlasting life. Where else are we going to go? And so I pursued that very hard. But then I was one of those guys. I was really obsessed with the Bible and the Word and studying. I studied all the time. And I became kind of foolishly judgmental, and I didn't even realize it. But I was like, I had it in my head, like, why are people living in sin? And how come people can't just chase after Jesus? And I don't want to watch the Superman movie. I want to study the Bible. Like, why are these guys doing this? And then I was lifting weights, and I slipped 2 discs in my back. And I had been sober for a long time, and I got prescribed on some medications, and that kind of opened the door to a few years of me understanding why people, live certain ways, and understanding and going through a lot of stuff. And that was about an 8-year process, really, for me. And only a couple years ago did I come back. Through that long journey, I lost touch. I came to a place where I wasn't seeking the Lord, and I had gotten totally consumed by carnal ideas and pleasures again. And I just made a lot of really bad decisions. I went down a lot of different roads, and I was still faithful. I still believed in God. Then I came, and Darby and I kept contact the whole time. He was such a great friend, and he lived with me. So through the business, I purchased a house, and we all lived in my big house, and I had a recording studio in the basement, and it was like the place everybody came and hung out. And then Darby came back for Graham Cook's school, and he was like on fire. And so he kept asking me for all the Bible stuff I had. He's like, hey man, can I get the Clarence Larkin charts? Can I get these books? Do you have all this Spurgeon stuff anymore? And so he was kind of like in a room of the house and just studying it and on fire. And I got with a girl and was like kind of just doing my thing and kind of nominally a nominal Christian. I had become one of those people that just believed but was letting it go by me. So fast forward a few years, this gets a little heavy. I'm going to say that right now. But I do have to say, every experience we go through is a part of it. It's a part of our journey.
That's right.
And I'm so grateful that I went through what I did go through and what I'm about to share too, because through that, I learned more of who God was and more of who I was without him. In walking away from God and being on the prescription medications, I ended up having a recording studio and getting back into the music stuff. And I surrounded myself by people and things that weren't very healthy for me. And I myself was making poor decisions. And I'm not going to say it was the people, it was my whole situation. And I surrounded myself by people that I didn't trust or understand. And I was through going back into those prescription medications, I ended up, doing some drugs and drinking and stuff like that, and made some more bad decisions. And I was in a situation where there was a girl that I was with, and I found out she was being abused by some men, and she was in a situation, she didn't really know what was going on, and I still don't know all the ins and outs of it. It's kind of,
no, it's okay.
Okay, it's kind of crazy. It's just a little touchy for me too. Yeah. So if Um, I really didn't know what was happening. And we went to the hospital for what I thought was a brown recluse bite, and she had been injected in the neck with something. And the doctors pulled me aside and said, "Hey, man, like, we don't know why you think this is a spider bite. We see this a lot when people are using drugs. I mean, I've never injected a drug. I'm not judging anybody who has. I'm not gone down that. This was all brand new stuff to me, so it was crazy." This led to her losing touch a lot, and she had 2 kids that we homeschooled, and it came to a point where I had to call her ex's parents to come pick up the children and take them away because she had been talking about her heart was stopping beating, and it was just really scary. And through that, I ended up closing the studio. I found out that a few of the guys who I was playing music with were involved in a situation with her, which I still don't know all the ins and outs of. This is actually the first time I've shared this publicly. I've shared it intimately. I shared it with Jose and Marissa last night a little bit, but so it's a little heavy for me. I had called the police. I had called crisis intervention. I did everything I could, and I closed my studio down, and we were down in the southern end of Lancaster County one day, and I was just like struggling. I was just trying to find a place for her to be safe. Mm-hmm. And we were at my friend's house, and she kind of had lost her cool. And I ran over to the neighbor's yard. I went over to the neighbors and said, "Hey, can you call the police?" They said, "Yeah." They were on the phone with the police. They called the police over. I had guns in the van that I had, which I shouldn't have had, and I put those firearms on me. And the police showed up, and I got arrested for having 2 firearms on me. Mm-hmm. And I turned them in. I was like, "Hey, listen, I don't know what's going on. She's saying she's going to kill me and stuff." And I had firearms I'm not supposed to, and I gave them to the police. The police weren't sure they were going to have to arrest me, but they did arrest me. And I had a felony from 20 years prior for conspiracy to sell marijuana because my brother was arrested with marijuana. A quarter ounce is what it was. I'm not against any. People can do whatever they want. I'm totally sober. That's just the way I am. And but through this experience, I then took her to try to take her to Georgia to her parents' house, her mom's house. And this is kind of heavy for me. I totally told myself I wasn't going to share this part, but I went to Georgia and I tried to drop her at her mom's, and she was like, "You're not staying at my mom's, you know." And so I called my dad, and he's like, "Yeah, you can come here, but don't bring, the young lady." And I went down there. My dad welcomed us with open arms, and we lived down there for a while. And I had not gone to court for the gun charges up north. Mm-hmm. So I was down in Florida. I had a warrant out for my arrest. Mm-hmm. I was like, this is just, so there was a night where some got a little rowdy. She had been cleaning and was like, "Let me out of the car." I let her out of the car. Fortunately, someone heard me say, like, "I can't do this anymore," and part of the whole thing go down. And she was at the hospital. I went to the hospital, and I went there and waited for 3 hours. They told me the doctor was going to come, but they had run my name, and the police came and took me in on my warrant. And so I went to jail. And I had not ever, I don't know if anybody here has been to jail. I don't recommend going. It was a very trying and scary experience for me at first. I was in there. I had no idea like how long I was going to be in there, what I was being charged for. It was during the time of COVID, so there was a quarantining period where they would keep you in quarantine for 2 to 3 weeks. And I'm very ignorant of what jail is like, or was at this time. So I thought this was going to be forever, that we were going to stay in this jail, and they were going to be, passing food underneath, and we weren't going to be able to talk to anybody. And I'm like, okay, these are really long days because you're isolated in this tiny cell, and you use the bathroom like right in front of each other. It's pretty crazy. And they don't even let you out for the first 21 days it was for me. And yeah. So I'm in jail. I was in the intake pod, and then all of a sudden they opened the door. They said, "Hey, we're taking you to a different pod. This is when everybody gets taken to their different locations." And I was like, "Okay, cool. We're going to get a little change of scenery." I wasn't really like, "Okay, cool." Sorry. And they're like, and they assigned me to a pod called B pod. And some of the other guys were like, "Oh man, you get to go to B pod?" I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "That's the blessed pod," is what they told me. I was like, "Okay." And at this point, I'm still in love with Jesus, but I'm like ashamed. I'm downtrodden. I'm beat. I'm living in fear. I have no idea. I had people that were around me that I didn't trust. My family, I'm estranged from them. I have a loving family that love me very much. My mom's worried. My grandparents, my father, everybody's trying to reach me. And I'm just in shame, estranged from all of them. And I'm in jail in the B pod. And by the way, this whole story I'm telling is an 8-year period. So now that this is like, I'm kind of like condensing it very much so. So pardon me. So I'm in the B pod. I get assigned, and there's a guy named Pie Man in there with me. He's my cellmate. And Pie Man, I'm like, hey, how's it going? He's like, hey, I'm in choir. I'm in the choir at the church. We're gonna have church tonight. Are you gonna come? I'm like, no, I'm not gonna come to church. I don't know. He's like, no, man, I'm in the choir. Come on, it'll be great. And so Pie Man made all the pies for everybody in the, like, he would take, they do crazy stuff in jail. It's really, they're very creative. So he would take anything with sugar and somehow turn it into a pie. I don't know. So I don't know what happened. It was really wild. But I went in there, and it was called the Blessed Pod because more than half of the people, there's about 90 people in the pod, and more than half of them would meet in a prayer circle every night. And it was I had been out in the world, and I had experienced some people really close to me taking advantage of me and using me. Guys I was paying the bills of, abusing these girls and stuff, confronted it in every way I could. And now I'm in jail, and I was scared in jail. And the guys in jail gave me more brotherly love than I could have ever expected. Like, I remember one of my favorite stories of that time that I can think of right now off the top of my head is I ran out of coffee, and I like mumbled it to someone that I was out of coffee. And everyone in the church walked by me and threw coffee on me. Like, so I had like tons of coffee. And it was really a beautiful experience. They would tell me like, hey, Woodman, we're going to roll up on you. And then they come up and they'd be like, okay, let's get these Bibles open. And we'd all be studying all this awesome Bible stuff. And this whole time, so I was in jail. I was just about to get out of jail when Darby actually was going in for his heart surgery. I don't know if anybody knows that, but he got a quintuple bypass. And I remember he called me on the phone. I finally talked to him. Because I mean, like, I was avoiding everybody for a long time at this point. I'm feeling so downtrodden. And what's amazing about situations like that is the people that do love you, and there are people that love you, you know, and God always loves you. The people that love you get so excited when you reach back out to them. You know, it was the first time I talked to my brother, my younger brother, and he's just like, my brother's a pretty hardened guy. He's not as boisterous and lively as I am. He's a little tougher, and he was weeping like a baby when he heard my voice. And so this through that, I remember Darby was telling me, yeah, I'm going in for quintuple bypass surgery. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, it's this little heart thing I gotta take care of. And he was so confident how it was gonna work out that it kind of brought me a huge peace. And I remember, like, I finally was feeling this peace over me. Because I gotta just segue, I love Darby. He and I have been on a roller coaster together. I mean, we were cruising around in cars that barely worked, going to different churches for a while, and, you know, just really going for Jesus and loving it. And so anyway, I was in jail, not having any idea when this is going to end. It felt like forever. It actually only lasted about 2.5 months, but it still feels like it was forever for me. Like, that was when you get isolated and you don't know what amount of time you're going to be in for, or what you're going to deal with. It's crazy. And you also, when you even more, I'd say, when we feel isolated, period, whether we're in jail or not in jail, when we're living in fear and we don't realize that we can overcome our obstacles and move forward, it's a really terrible place to be at. And it can happen to a lot of us. And it's like believing lies and believing the misdirection of our own carnality and flesh, and also, of course, of the evil one. And when we set ourselves up in those situations, we can get in a cyclical growth period of fear just overtaking us. And I was in that place. I had totally forgotten who I was. And I mean, I wouldn't say I was the kind of guy that I still wouldn't tell a lie. I still was trustworthy. I was lying to myself, though. I lost myself. And my family, oh my gosh, they cared so much the whole time. And Darby cared so much the whole time. Long story short, or shorter, the Blessed Pod was a really great experience for me. And it caused me to start seeking God again very heavily while I was in there. And also, the guys in there really, really touched me. The preachers were great. There were people getting saved within jail. There were I believe 12 or 14 baptisms that happened in the jail. The wardens would come down and they'd stand with us and they'd pray with us, and they really, and these guys, I was in with hardened criminals. Like our preacher, Pastor Philip, was in trouble because he shot at someone like a bunch of times, but when he got locked up, he also had a life-changing experience. And so one day came and they would say, when you're about to get out of jail, they'd say, like, roll up. And that means roll your stuff up, get out of there. And a federal agent named Officer Stokes came in and picked me up and took me down back to Lancaster from Florida. And I'd never gone to jail before. Okay. I'm not like the kind of guy who's like gun toting, you know what I mean? So this to me was like just like a kind of a freak thing, but it was the greatest thing that could have ever happened to me, because it did separate me from feeling responsible for that girl who I was still in some troubling situations for, who is thankfully doing great now, and that makes me very joyful. So Officer Stokes and I had actually a great time. I flew on an airplane with shackles. They chain you to your feet, and they sit you in the back of the airplane. And the officer had really dry humor, so it's like real comfy, isn't it? I'm like, yeah, it's real comfy. But we did get to load the plane. We got to board the plane first, so that was kind of, if any of you fly a lot, you know, gotta find the good in that. So he actually opened up to me about his life and his family and all this stuff, and he told me, which I kind of appreciated. He was like, you know what, Woody, you're my best convict I've ever traveled with. He's like, well, you're as good as the best. He corrected himself. Thanks. And then I got to Lancaster County Prison, which, man, was a totally different ball game. In Leon County, which was in Tallahassee, Florida, where I was locked up, it was jail, but we had a basketball court that you could go into every night, you know, and you were out of your cell for a couple hours, and you know, people, I don't know, it was a good experience for me. I got to Lancaster and I was like in this tiny little cell, and I'm just like, oh man, I think I'm going to be there forever. And this public defender comes to me and he's like, oh yeah, so you got picked up on a warrant? Okay, I think we're going to get you out today. And I was like, this was the day that I got into Lancaster, and I'd just been away for 2.5 months, and I'm like just blown away, you know, blown away. So I got let out. He told me that around 7 a.m. I went to around noon. I got in at 1:30 a.m. Around noon, he told me, I think I'm going to get you out today. And at 7 p.m., I remember, 5 p.m., I remember going in front of the bail judge. And the bail judge decides whether or not he's going to reinstate your bail as it is, or going to double your bail and whatnot. And my bail was $50,000 unsecured. Which means you don't have to pay anything to it. So the prosecutors are saying, like, double his bail, make it secured. And the judge like put his hand up like this. He said, Mr. Campbell, tell me why you left on your warrant. I said, you know, my ex-girlfriend was in really bad shape. I didn't know what to do. I was confused. I was making bad decisions. And he said, hold up. He said, I'm buying the ex-girlfriend bid. You're getting out today. And so the same day I flew into Lancaster, before 24 hours passed, I was out. And I was back around all the people that love me, really. I got picked up. And so through that period of time and those bad decisions I made, when I got saved, I left the band, which was my decision. And I'm still good friends with the guys now. But then I had a business that I had started. I left the business. I hadn't gone back. Then I get out of jail and I call my old business partner, who's now my boss. And I call up and I was like, hey, man. He's like, hey, I heard you're back. Glad you're out of jail. Because he actually called me while I was in there too. It's funny. It probably the lies we tell ourselves when we're downtrodden, like that nobody cares about us. To hear grown men I love like crying. I'm not trying to say it's validating or anything like that, but it just was such rewarding feeling to know that people loved you. And what I think is important, and the most important thing in my message today, is that God's not a respecter of persons. And what he's done for any of us, he'll do for all of us. And he does love us no matter what, and nothing can separate us from that. And so if we're feeling in those places of fear, It's a matter of stepping out and into faith and moving forward in that faith with God and making that leap and finding the stairs below you. I'd said to Karen, and she remembered it, I said, yeah, I had to fall down a few flights of stairs to find an elevator. Because, well, my boss said to me, I was like, yeah, I'm going to get a job at a pizza shop or something. He's like, you're not going to get a job at a pizza shop. He's like, come here, ride the bus. I didn't have a vehicle at the time. Well, I had some in Florida, but it's like, ride the bus, you come work here, you can pull stone out of molds. And so that's kind of like, at our business, that's like the entry level job. You come in and it's really hard working. And I don't know how these guys do it like they do it, because if after 8 hours, like, you got to wear a back brace, there's dust everywhere. And they're these young guys that are just flying. They're just like flying, doing it. They're so, but there was a language barrier, but the love that we had even in there was just awesome. So yeah, I went back to work there. And at that time, I can remember, pardon me, I know I'm repeating some stuff I said last night too. I can remember it was a big warehouse. I remember looking up at the clock, and I would go up to my boss, and I remember him saying a couple things to me. One was, can't come up in the office. And another was, I can't trust a word that's coming out of your mouth because of all the stuff that you've been through. So you need to go back down there and sweat it out. And so for 7 weeks, I sweated out, and then they started giving me a little bit more responsibility. Darby actually had prophesied to me over the time. When I was debating whether or not I was going to go back to work with, which the company's called Livingstone's Masonry. When I was deciding whether or not I was going to go back to work, Darby's like, yeah, go back to work. He's like, someday you're going to be at the top again. I know it. I can see it. And I'm like, yeah, right. Those guys hate me. They think I'm crazy. I left the business, this, that, and the other. And when I left, I was young and foolish. And I took a lot of things for granted. And I was more interested in being the owner than being a leader. And so coming back and having to start from the bottom, I remember at times, when I first started, part of it was because of my ignorance and my nervousness. I wouldn't go out I wouldn't be personally getting out on every job. I would sometimes just drive by, look at a job, make sure the guys are doing well. But I was a greenhorn, I had no idea. This time, starting from the bottom and coming back up, well, I went from my boss telling me he can't trust a word that comes out of my mouth, to him telling me that he's so grateful that I'm there, and that he trusts me, and he's never had as much peace of leaving the business alone with somebody. And we're really faith-based business. And so through these situations, and through taking my focus off of myself and my situations and going back onto Jesus, he rebuilt and restored everything. It says here, Joel 2:26, that he'll restore what the locusts have eaten. And that's an idea. The power of God and the restoration of God comes more quickly and speedily than we could ever imagine. There's also a scripture redeeming the time, because the times are evil. I don't know. I'll just expound a little bit about redemption. Redemption, the word comes from a term called agora, which is marketplace. And the word redemption is agorazo in the Greek. And the idea is that through Christ's sacrifice and his blood, he purchased us back. He redeemed us. So the idea of redeeming the time has a context of submitting ourselves to God and the will of God, and redeeming even the time when we've made mistakes and made those errors. And what God showed me is that through even my stupidest, worst decisions I could possibly make, he was always there. And the moment that I turned back to him, he restored things way more greatly, exceedingly and abundantly over what I could imagine. So now I'm the lead project manager and lead of production again at work. And this happened in a very short period of time. Darby also prophesied that my boss was going to buy out his other business partner, and he did. None of this was even on the table when Darby was saying this stuff. So I just think that's so crazy. And we came to this point. At first, I wasn't going to share this testimony. I forgot that I was being called here to share my testimony. I saw Karen last week. I had this whole spiel I was ready to share, like getting in the word. And she's like, hey, you're going to share your testimony next week, right? I'm like, oh, yeah, well, I think I'm kind of through that, And then but you're never through your testimony.
Never.
And that's what helps a lot of other people get through at times, too. And The greatest thing that I realized about God is at first I had a lot of head knowledge. I knew that Bible up and down, and I was walking righteously. I'm telling you, it was crazy. God empowered me so much during that 6 or 7 year honeymoon period that I would not even, I was empowered very, very well. I was holding on to my own righteousness, basically. And I was justifying my faith through that righteousness. I was not falling into the obstacles that a lot of other young men do or a lot of other situations do. And I was haughty about it. And I thought, like, how come people can't walk this way as well? And I got knocked down very far to a place where I had to be low and I had to be saved out of my own self. It was like almost like my second salvation experience. And God restored everything that He started building in me. But the thing that something that my old pastor Pops used to say, and Pops is really the guy who taught me how to study the Greek and the Hebrew. And I did go to Bible college too, but it was different. He was an inner city guy in Pittsburgh, and he was just, I hadn't met anybody who's in love with Jesus as this man. You know, you just walked around him and he just exuded that love for God. You're like, hey, Woodman, TG Woodman. It was trust God. He's like, that's the greatest secrets of the Bible. TG is one of them. And and of course, love, the greatest of these. So he told me to often say, pardon me, I got flushed with memories there. But he'd say, it can't be taught, it's got to be caught. And that's like the things of God. They can't be taught, they have to be caught. Some of us have to experience them. I am a stubborn fool, so I have to experience a lot of stuff the hard way. I would not change any of my experiences for the world, but now I'm in a place where I'm surrounded by all people I love all the time. I was telling Jose and Marissa last night that I talk to my mom more than anybody else. So she and I were estranged for a while, and you know, for anybody that isn't talking to their kiddos or anything like that right now, yeah, that came back around in a big way. And I think too, for anybody that feels alone or like in fear, God is a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. And it's as simple as that, really. The carnal mind gives us enmity, kind of pushes us away from God. The spiritual mind has us go towards God. Again, like the man with the leap of faith. When we do faith on God and trust His word, things work out exceedingly and abundantly beyond our wildest imagination. I have not seen nor ear heard, nor has entered in the hearts of man what God has prepared for those who love Him, right? And I mean, I know some of that connotation is, you know, in the next realm, but even here on earth, like my life every day I wake up and I'm super excited every day of my life. Oh yeah, I got this microphone. I started hearing that again. And I work at Livingstone's Masonry again, and we're a Christ-centered business. And we got lots of great guys there. I was speaking a lot about the Guatemalan guys I love so much, but it's a lot of Guatemalans and some folks from Ecuador, some guys from Mexico, lots of, you know, a few other guys too, but a lot of Hispanic folks that really love Jesus, and some project managers, and just a good group, and it's all like a big family. And we have worship music blaring 24/7 when we're there, when we're not there. And I'm really seeing the Lord work in really beautiful, huge ways. And I'm grateful to be here too. There's nothing really like carrying the testimony of our lives and of Jesus to other people and to each other, and encouraging each other with these things until that very day that He comes. And we are in a crazy, tumultuous time right now, obviously, in this world. I can't even believe it. Not to rant too much, I have no idea how much time I have, but I could definitely keep talking. So I'm going to branch off a little bit and talk about what's going on today. So in the time of the book of Revelation, there's a group of 7 churches. Those 7 churches were on a trade route. At the time, those churches all had temples and temple coins awarded to them. They were also created for the worship of deities. One of the most common ones that you can hear of or read about in antiquity is Ephesus, and the temple of Ephesus. And these spiritual beings that were worshipped at these places along the trade route were hermaphroditic beings that had a hunter-gatherer and a fertility aspect to them. At these places, the Aquacurrent was one of them too. They would have many temple prostitutes. And at these places, there was the idea was actually, let's go into this. So if you think of like the book of Corinthians, there's a scripture that says to wear the head covering and to not to speak in church. Women are not supposed to wear head coverings and not speak in church. That came from the women that were getting saved from one of those acrocurrents, the acrocurrent from one of those temples. So they were getting saved. Spiritual beings, they said, entered through the head, so they had to wear head coverings. And they weren't allowed to talk in church because they were still drinking and going to church. So when you look at the historicity of these things, it gets pretty wild. How I was comparing it to today is today they're going into our schools and they're teaching the children that, you know, you have the choice of what sex you are, who you believe you are, and you can get adopted by other families now and all these crazy things. So we're living into a society that's going back to those days that was warned about, where gender is getting kind of washed away and flushed away and being encouraged. And you're closed-minded if you don't support it. And my stance on that is like, I love everybody, you know what I mean? But there's a point where you draw the line, you know, and there's a point where it's not safe anymore. And I just don't know why, but I felt I had to share that. It's stimulating something in me. And I think during this time more than ever, we really have to seek truth. And more than ever, maybe someone would say that's relative. Maybe we always have to seek truth, right? But we have to prove all things and hold fast to that which is good. And we're at a time period where the gospel is reaching the entire earth, the ends of the earth. And it's going to come to a place where, I mean, we're on the verge of global disaster, catastrophe, it almost seems daily. And we still have that hope. It says we can be deceived if even the very elect, and also we have to keep our eyes open. There'll be a time period where, you know, prophetically we'll see something called the abomination of desolation is spoken of in the prophet Daniel's seat on the most holy place. So I don't know why I'm going into all this, sorry. What will happen is someone will go over there, sit on the holy place where now there's a dome of the rock and the temple's not built right now. But the temple will be rebuilt. Someone will sit at that most holy place and we'll have unified all of Mesopotamia, the Fertile Crescent, for 3.5 years. And after that 3.5 years of peace, there'll be peace, and then sudden destruction. So when you see the abomination of desolation, who will be of Assyrian descent and will deny the religion of his parents sitting on that throne, it's going to get hairy. So I think we're leading into that because the Bible talks about 3 major stages in prophecy. It talks about the beginning of sorrows, it talks about tribulation, and then it talks about the wrath of God. The beginning of sorrows is roughly, depending on how you look at it, could be a period of 3 decades, 33 years, depends how you interpret different scriptures. And you have to really search through them to find that. But it talks about wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes in various places, and pretty much mankind's demolishment of itself. And then the tribulation talks about how basically Satan is going to oppress the people of God through that time. And the time of Jacob's trouble, of course, within that. And then the wrath is when God comes down, puts a stop to it, and kind of like squashes everything that Satan's got going on. But I don't know why I had to share that, but I did. I haven't even thought about that for a long time, so there it is. And basically, when we're in this time where we are blurring the lines of gender and we are blurring the lines of right and wrong, and really we're pretty much, it said in the times of Noah. And when I look back and I see all the great empires that have fallen, I've seen how they fall. They fall when they lose touch of truth, and they write out excessive amounts of bank loans that they can't, back up. But which is what happened to the Roman Empire. Part of what happened to the Roman Empire. And anyway, thanks for having me share my testimony. I guess I could rant about a bunch of different things, but I really appreciate being here. And I don't know how I'm doing on time. I have no idea.
You're good.
If that's good.
You're very good.
Okay. But thank you.
That was wonderful.
Thank you very much.
What is going through my heart when you're talking about end times and everything is just that you have to know the truth, because there's a storm of deception all around. And if you don't stand on the truth, you will be taken up in the storm. And it gets harder and harder to define the truth when the lies are just excessive, you know? So, and we were talking earlier, it's like, but you don't know what you don't know. So you have to keep moving forward, passionately seeking the truth. You can't just rest in, okay, I'm good. I think I know what I need to know. No, that doesn't work. And the way that we do that is we just stay connected with the body of Christ. We keep following after the truth and keep growing and developing as believers. We never stop learning. We're never supposed to stop. We're never supposed to say, okay, I'm good. I got it all figured out. I think I got my Bible. I don't need anything. It doesn't work that way. So we appreciate your testimony. Testimonies are so powerful because they just shows the faithfulness and the passion of God to constantly pursue the beloved, which we are. We have to remember that. So, okay, so you can close out the Zoom. Bye. See you next time. Bye-bye. So